Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies podcast. I'm John Pemberton, a diabetes educator and researcher living with type 1 diabetes since 2008. I started the Glucose Never Lies website when my son tested positive for type 1 diabetes antibodies. In that moment, I realized I needed to build a resource strong enough to guide anyone who might care for him. At first, that meant writing clear, actionable management guides, but listening to Peter Attia's The Drive taught me something. Peter's conversations provide depth across nutrition, exercise, pharmacology, sleep, and much more. But I always find myself wondering, how does this information apply to people with type 1 diabetes? And this podcast is my attempt to fill that gap. I have access to the world's leading researchers and thought leaders in type 1 diabetes. That gives me a unique opportunity to combine lived experience, professional expertise, and cutting-edge science, and to share it all on here in conversation. But an important note, this podcast is for informational purposes only. These conversations share knowledge and experiences. They do not create a therapeutic relationship. So, let's get started. Welcome to the first ever Glucose Never Lies Inspiring Stories episode, where with us we have Robin and we also have Roger Moore, who, if you have been subscribed to the Glucose Never Lies, you will have seen the inspiring story probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, where Robin reached out to the Glucose Never Lies and said that there was something a bit special going on over in Canada. And what was interesting to me was the level of innovation that the team and Roger was able to do to make automated insulin delivery possible when it seemed impossible. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you both to the show. How are you doing?
Great.
Good, thanks.
Okay, good. So I've sort of given away a little bit about how this sort of is going to flow, but essentially, we'd like to get to know you a little bit first. So Robin, are you happy to kind of tell us a little bit about what you do and obviously how you came into contact with Roger?
Yeah, I'm a diabetes educator in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I work at a general endocrinology clinic. We have 8 endocrinologists there, and then I'm an educator. And Roger is one of our patients that I think you came to us maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It was
I was trying to think about that. Yeah.
right around the
Yeah.
COVID pandemic. I think you
Yeah.
needed an endo because Central Alberta kind of lost their endocrinologist during the pandemic. So then he came over to our clinic. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I think I met Roger. And yeah, here we are.
And obviously, Roger, you're going to be the star of this episode because you've got an interesting journey. I think that anyone can draw some strength and draw some real life experience from. So tell us a little bit about how old you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and just a little bit about your journey, about how you've got to this point.
Well, I'm 60 now. I was diagnosed at 2. And, back then there was no blood glucometers. It was all, urine sticks or,
Glass syringes.
glass syringes. My dad was a diabetic too, and my mom had to boil glass syringes, for the insulin. And at 22, I started having eyesight problems. My doctor noticed. So within a year after multiple laser, and I had 4 vitrectomies, they call them, within the eyes, that they actually do surgery in the eye that were not successful. I was totally blind by January of '88. And then
How was that? Because obviously, from managing diabetes with just the tools that you had available at that time were limited in any compared to today's tools that we have, and obviously then losing your sight. What was that like to go to that transition? I can imagine it was incredibly difficult.
Well, I was very active. I was I had racehorses, and I rode quarter horses and trained them. But everything just came to a stop. I had to get rid of everything, and anyways, what was available for blind at the time to fill a needle, what they call an accountant, where you clip the syringe on the side and the bottles of insulin in a little holder on the top, and you could, guide it into the needle, and it had a little roller on the side that every time you turned it, it clicked 2 units, and then you could turn it around. And the holder held 2 bottles. That was the Lente and Toronto, which was the slow and then the fast acting.
Mm-hmm.
So you could turn it around and then fill whatever else you needed.
2 units at a time.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just the tactile bit of that alone seems really difficult. And with that time, was there blood glucose meters around at that time? The finger stick ones with the strips.
I'm trying to remember back. I think there was one called an Ames that where you prick your finger, put the blood on the strip, wait so many seconds, and blotted it off, and then put it in the machine. I think that was the only one around before I went blind. But before that, it was a little gizmo. You put the lancet in, you cocked it back, and held your finger up against it, and hit the button. It was like a
harpoon.
like a harpoon.
Yeah, yeah, doesn't sound fun.
That encourages to do your blood testing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, once a month.
Yeah, that's about it.
And obviously that was when you was in your 20s, and then things obviously has progressed from as technology's gone along. What sort of therapies did you, obviously you got a blood glucose meter at some point. Was that a one with an audible sound, or was it one that someone had to tell you the number?
No, they had some, I'm just trying to think, don't you remember the profile blood glucose meters there? And but there was a little box that somebody made that was a voice synthesizer that you plugged into it, and it would read the reading off the meter. But that was it. If you missed hearing what it said, you had to do it all over again. Oh yeah. So that was, and then later on, Roche had come up with a device that was infrared. It was VoiceMate. It was like a little computer itself too, and it was really good. But it would always fry itself. It wouldn't last, and so they discontinued it. So they did. But then today in Canada, the only available blood clues, a talking meter, is an Oracle. Not to discredit Oracle, but it's not the greatest meter out there. So I was messing around with the Bear Contour and an app on my iPod, and I got it to work.
To read you the numbers?
Yeah. And I could pair and do everything myself and go back there. That's what I use today.
Okay. So when you need to do a finger stick, you got the contour meter speaking to the iPod, and then that can tell you your number?
Yep.
And how did you work that out? Because necessity is the mother of all invention, and it sounds like through necessity you've got some cool stuff going on.
Everything I've done is out of necessity, right? But it's just, I don't know. I wasn't going to give up on it. Something had to work. But that was.
And then I know sort of when Robin reached out, one of the things that she mentioned was obviously the challenges alone from what you've described. You've got the sort of getting the insulin injections in. You've got the finding out the glucose numbers, and then as continuous glucose monitoring comes along, how are you going to kind of get advantages from that? And then the next step comes along, which is the automated insulin delivery system or the hybrid closed loop systems. And obviously they're not, I guess, geared for or accessible for people with sight loss, or certainly not to be independent anyway. Obviously, if people are going to be supporting, that's a different situation. But obviously, if you're living independently, I should imagine it was something that you thought, this would be great. This is exactly what I need, but it seems that maybe it's not accessible. Is that how it seemed at the time?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll go back a little bit. 2010, when I lived in Ontario, I'm in Alberta now. I asked him about a pump, and he took over for my older end, endocrinology. He retired, and he was forward thinking, open minded. So he said, "Go try it, see what you can do." So, but it was a Roche pump, but it didn't talk or nothing. They were just all audible beeps. So I had the rep from Roche wrote out all the instructions on how to work it. So it was still memorized all the different beeps. But the downside to it was I wasn't able to change any basal rate or anything like that by myself. I had to have someone read the screen.
And the list of that rep that did for that pump, Roger brought it to our clinic. We have it saved on our computers. It's like 2 pages long.
Yeah.
Like, it's extensive. And like for myself reading it, I'm like, oh my God, if you got stuck in a submenu of a submenu, like you need like an abort button, because I don't know how, I feel like even cited, it looked, so like you managed to figure that out.
You pull the battery out,
You pull there you
plug
go.
it back in, and restart from scratch.
There's the abort button.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's dedication right there. And I guess and how did you find the pump? Did you find the pump more advantageous than injections for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Just the freedom of being able to give the extra doses and things.
exactly. Right. You go out to eat or something, and, you just hit the button, give a couple of units, whatever extra you needed. But, it was just a manual pump, right? It had no automation to it at all. So
And then did you move to a continuous glucose monitor before going on to, obviously we'll get to talk about the specific system that you sort of co-designed. What continuous glucose monitor did you use, and how did you sort of figure that out?
I use the Libre 2, and the app works pretty good with the VoiceOver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was using that for a while, and when we had to switch, I switched over to the other system, the Dexcom. It's the only one that'll hook up to it, I think, in Canada. Why? Some of them in Europe use the Libre.
Yeah. We have a mixture of sort of the Libre and the Dexcom. And so you mentioned the Libre app that had a voiceover tell you the number and where their arrow was going. Is that similar for the Dexcom?
Well, no, your iPhone has VoiceOver built right into the system.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to go into accessibility and turn it on. And every time you swipe, it'll read, speak whatever it's
On the screen.
Right?
But the Libre we discovered, and Roger didn't realize, and I didn't realize, it wasn't until we switched him to Dexcom, you asked, like, what are all these right-facing arrows?
Yeah.
And so the whole time he had been wearing the Libre, like different apps will work differently with the voiceover. So the entire time he was wearing the Libre, the voiceover was just saying, like, he could be 12.1 right-facing arrow, 4.1 right-facing arrow. It never told him the arrow direction and the trend of his blood sugars.
So you just thought it was all the same.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so when they're making the app, sometimes they'll even on the computer, they'll put print in a graphic form. Well, the voiceover and the program on my computer, they will not read graphics.
Yeah.
But it still shows up on a screen to someone that can see as a number, right? Or letters or there. That's one of the barriers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had some experience with the pump where you was kind of working off beeps and complicated menus and kind of having to memorize all these steps and having to jump out and abort and kind of go back, and no doubt taking so much time to do these things. And obviously then you have some experience with continuous glucose monitoring where you have one system where you're getting a reading but just a right-facing arrow all the time, so you had no understanding of where it was going. Then you switch to the Dexcom, where sounds like the voiceover was able to pick up that much clearer in terms of the arrows. So you started then getting some directional information of where the glucose level was going. And then when did obviously when did the AID or the hybrid closed loops sort of in Canada, when did they start to get rolled out to people, Robin?
Like Medtronic 670 had been here for quite some time, but I would say that was the only commercial pump. And we knew Medtronic was never an option for Roger because for the longest time, if you're familiar with Medtronic, they had a rotating access button to get into the system. So that was never going to work. An 80, the menu was still too complex. And then I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, Tandem came to them, and that still wasn't an option. We thought about it for a long time. Like Roger had talked about putting these like drops that harden on the screen so he could landmark where the menu was, but it just still felt too hard. How do you get back to a main menu? The cartridge load also felt like a barrier to me. So we really only had Medtronic and Tandem, obviously DIY. Omnipod 5 was only released maybe 6 months ago. So we haven't had a ton of access. Yipso Med with their CAM APS was only released maybe 3 months ago. So it's been slow to roll out in Canada to begin with. Yeah.
So then when did the idea come for the current system? And so tell us a little bit about how the genesis of that came together. What does it involve? How did it all happen?
Lots of reading.
Yeah. Yeah, like, and Roger's really good about doing his research too. So it reduced the burden on me, and like you've always been so resourceful and resilient. So we discovered that the Medtronic Lure Lock infusion sets would work for his pump. So to bridge supplies, because his was discontinued. So we started ordering all of those just to squirrel up supplies as a just in case. And I really didn't have a plan in my head of how to do it. Initially, when Tandem was rolling out, they mentioned that the mobile app was going to be available soon after, but we had been 3 years in, 4 years in, and they still hadn't had a plan for it. So I think we kind of knew that that wasn't going to be a viable option. Um, and then I started listening to Diabetic podcast, and he's a looper. And I think it was like a Sunday night. I emailed Roger, and he must have been having the same thought because it was a Sunday night. And I said, "What about do it yourself loop?" And I think you had replied almost at the same time of like, "What about loop?" We clearly were on the same wavelength of potentially doing it. But the next barrier would obviously be rebuilding the algorithm, and that wouldn't be an option for Roger. But fortunately, we do have a clinic in Canada that employs like software techs or engineers, and they build the algorithm ahead of time and put it on people's phones so they don't have to build it, and they maintain it. So that's BC Diabetes. So after that email exchange, I said, let me talk to Dr. Rogers and see what she thinks. And let's see what we can do. So then that week talked to Anna Rogers, and she's like, I mean, if Roger can do it and Dr. Elliott at BC Diabetes is agreeable, why not? And so that's kind of how the journey began. We didn't really know we didn't know. Like it's just been like a learning together sort of thing, and troubleshooting in real time. But we did it in a very sequential manner. So, we reached out to Dr. Elliott at BC Diabetes, and he was agreeable to try it. They had no experience with VoiceOver accessibility, so they weren't sure how it was going to work. So we reached out, but he was game. So that was like step one. Okay, we could have an algorithm built and maintained without either of us having to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then how you start with the deck. And then that was a bit of a game changer because now you have trend arrows, not just a right facing arrow. So that made a difference. And then we put the algorithm on Roger's phone. So he had to come into Edmonton because he's about an hour outside of Edmonton. So we did the appointment at the clinic virtually. So I helped him put all the apps on his phone. And then they also put Caregiver and on my phone. We did the simulator for a while. And the simulator and the CGM was basically for you to iron out the bugs of the voiceover and really playing with the app.
See if I can use it.
Yeah. So you did that for a bit, and then we switched to saline. Oh, sorry, John, you can go.
No, I was just going to say, was that on the iPhones? The loop, the algorithm, obviously you create and you obviously download from, I think it's from GitHub, isn't it? Or somewhere like that. And then you obviously plug in the settings that you want and you kind of create it, and then you deploy that then as an app onto your phone as a developer. Then once you did that, you then obviously had the voiceover stuff to find out, like, can you use this? Can you get round? Can you understand what it's saying? Can you do the set changes and everything? So you had a period of trying to work that out simulation wise, did you say?
Yeah, the only thing that is not accessible for me on that is the graph with loop app.
And the prediction. I think.
Yeah, well, the predictions will
You
read.
do okay.
Yeah, the predictions read, but when you turn the phone sideways, I guess there's a graph there, and I've tried to play around with different settings, and it just gives me a bunch of mumbo jumbo numbers, eh? Yeah.
Well, I can imagine, because if I'm right in saying the Loop app, you've kind of got glucose on the top, then you've got insulin on board, and you sometimes have carbs on board on the bottom. So obviously the graphic would have some explanation to do to try and get those visuals across. But obviously, if you know how it's set up and you know what the settings are in the background, which it sounds like you're heavily involved in, deciding what they were going to be, you then know when you put those inputs in what's relatively going to be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just figuring out like what is it reading, there's different ways that the app can read or the voiceover can read the app. So, like we don't need it to read the X and Y axes, right? That's too much information. So it was helpful that I could see what he had on his phone so that I could walk him through of what's actually on the app so that when he's hearing it, he can place, okay, this is what's happening on my app. So we did the simulator for a while. Then we got to the next step of saline and an actual pod because the simulator, we didn't need a pod or anything like that.
No.
And then we got to saline and the pod. We had some good laughs over this.
Yeah.
He would show up at clinic with a pod in a Ziploc bag. And you were really good at troubleshooting the nuances of these things. So we did, saline for 2-3 months.
Yeah.
I remember he mastered it, and Dr. Anna Rogers and I were both at EASD in Madrid, and he's like, I want to go live on insulin. And they're like, you have to wait till you get back.
Cancel your trip.
Yeah. Yeah. So poor guy had to wait a little bit longer. But yes, we did saline for a while with the Dexcom, and I think we had pretty much ironed out all the weird app kinks and that sort of thing. And then it was like, how do we consistently fill the pod? And that one was kind of in real time too, like just doing the amount of pumps that I do at the clinic. Now Roger uses the syringe and cartridges, but in the beginning we were kind of like, how do we navigate this so it's safe and consistent and build confidence and competence? And I didn't feel that the syringe and a cartridge would be the best initial approach. So that's when we decided to do pens, and then Roger showed up at clinic with one of his like amazing devices. You can see here.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely got to see this in action because I'm really interested to just. So I'm right in saying, Roger, you've made this, right?
Where's the first one?
And then I'm moving everything around, which screws him up.
This is the first one.
Okay. So I'm just going to explain this because some of the listeners will be listening and not viewing this as a video, but it is available on YouTube. So we've basically got a sort of wooden base, think of kind of like an 8-inch by 4-inch sort of profile with probably about an inch in depth from the bottom. And there's almost like, it could be strange, a small train on top, a train of wood on top, which has got a hole, which I'm presuming.
This is a pretty rough
draft.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. And then you got a hole in the base where the pod goes. And then presumably once you've filled the syringe with insulin, you've got that hole to guide it straight directly into the place where you want it to go into the pod. So then you've got the full fill, right?
So like that, where you fill the pod is in the little corner here.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a woodworker, so I have a machine I cut the groove out with, and then we made a mold and put the pod in to keep the mold from tipping.
Yeah.
And then this, I'll tell you, this part here is tapered.
Yes.
So I got a tapered drill bit, and that just, you put you screw the tip on, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you put
So you actually, in this version, you just had the pen straight through, then you had the needle on the end, and then you would dial up the units and just keep pushing them through?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You could dial it up and then push it down.
Okay. So you didn't use a syringe for this one, just a straight pen.
Yeah, we knew him dialing all the way to the maximum was 60 units. So then he
Mm-hmm.
2 full dials, and we'd have 120 in the pod. Plus the pod
Nice.
Yeah.
does at 80 units.
Okay.
Yeah. But the
Nice.
problem with this is what I found out was this part here, the tapered part between manufacturers was a different size. So if somebody else wanted to, depending on what 10, like, it wouldn't work. So
That's one point.
That's where you move to Mark 2. So Mark 1 was with the actual insulin pen itself. And then Mark 2, by the looks of things, is similar, but a smoother and sexier looking device, which now got, you've got a similar base where you have the pod grooved perfectly for the profile of the pod. And now you have what looks like a place for the syringe this time. So you're going to fill a syringe from the cartridge. Is that right?
that's right. From the kit that comes with the Omnipod, there's the cartridge, right? And then it goes down right into here, right? It just same like, yeah.
Perfect. So that could be reproducible for anyone, couldn't it? To who had site issues, you've kind of got the profile there for anyone who whatever insulin they were on, and they could draw it from that. And obviously the hole is set perfectly, so when the needle goes straight through, it sort of hits. Although I should imagine there's a little bit of playing around to get it to hit in exactly in the middle, or is it pretty spot on most times?
Pretty spot on, eh? It doesn't.
And I should say, like, Roger does all of this by feel, so even the corners of these are chamfer. Yeah, they're like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it looks it. Yeah, it absolutely looks it. So, I mean, how long did it take you to sort of work out and master that sort of design? How long do you think it took the trial and error to get that right?
It didn't take you long.
Not long at all. No. Once I figured out that the first option wasn't going to work out as good,
yeah,
then I decided the biggest reason I wanted to use the first option because it was you could dial it up the pen, right, as many units as you want. But this now, with the needle that comes with the kit, it holds 200 units, and I just fill 200.
Yeah,
and then I use like the pen cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
No,
fill it up from.
Yes, it was 300. So I just keep the extra 100. And so when I get it, like the third fill, I'll use 2 of these with them instead of.
That's cool.
Insulin.
And you've got your phone there, right? You was going to sort of play some of the voiceover as kind of some of the things that it will talk to you. Is it possible to kind of get a feel for what that sounds like for you?
9:35 a.m. Dot. Phone. Make. Mess. Pay. Loop. Beta. Double. Loop. CGM status. 11.0 at 9:32 a.m. Flat. Loop ran 2 minutes ago. Closed. Pump status. Glucose. Eventually 5.9 miles. Active insulin. 2.40 U. Insulin delivery. 12 U total. Active carbohydrates. 0 grams. Toolbar. Add meal. Pre-meal targets. Button. Bolus. Button. Workout targets. Button. Settings. Button. Settings. Button.
And
yeah, I mean, you can hear there, you've got obviously the insulin dose that you've given, you've got kind of the active insulin on board, you've got the carbs on board, and you've obviously got the timings where you've given the insulin as well. So you kind of get the full picture there of everything that's going on.
That's one part of that. And then there's
settings.
So that's if you want to close a loop or open the loop, right? And then there's automatic bolus, or you can turn it on or off, or just I think it's just basal.
Yeah, the temp
basal. Yeah.
Alert management. Configuration. Heading. Therapy settings. Diabetes treatment.
And this your therapy settings.
Therapy settings. Diabetes.
This is where you change all your, which I couldn't do before.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you can change your basal rate.
Glucose safety limit. Premium. 5 carb ratios. Your carb ratio is the number of grams of carbohydrates covered by 1 U forward. Button 12 a.m. 15. G 5 p.m. per hour that you want to use.
So he can do this all now on his own.
So how long do you think it took you to feel comfortable with? Obviously, you were involved in setting up the loop and the algorithm. You spent a good time with sort of saline, making sure you were happy with how things were going to run. You then created your own filling station, which is amazing. And then obviously then you've got the daily in-play usage of all these different things that you've never heard before or never had access to before. And there's a lot of them, especially on the loop option. How long realistically do you think it took you to get comfortable with how this thing was working and how it's managing your diabetes?
Probably about a month or
Yeah.
maybe less.
Oh, are you going to say like a year or something?
I'm still learning some of the little tricks of trade of the loop app, right? So, every diabetic's different, right? So but
Yeah, I'd say Roger picked it up once we knew that the voiceover was going to work with the app, and then it was just really teaching you about AID and the nuances of AID, like treating a low on a automated pump versus a manual.
Yeah.
But you were ready to rock. I think it was more me and Dr. Rogers that were like, so we're going to this conference. You got to wait for us to get back. And so you did. And the day we went live, it was kind of anticlimactic, actually. We were like, yeah, okay, it's good. Let's go.
And what sort of difference has it made for your glucose control? So obviously you've had a range of different therapies. You've worn CGM. You've probably known what your timing ranges and HbA have been along the way. Has there been a significant change since you've gone on the loop?
I was always running around 6.97, my A1C, and it went down to within probably 6 months, 5.8.
Okay, wow. So to drop right down. And in terms of how much input was required from you on a daily basis to kind of keep track of things, do you think it's more or do you think it's less on this system?
Well, I guess being at the it's kind of a hard question to answer because my old pump never talked, right? And
Yeah.
well, that's when I can have more information, and then if I get the arrows, and it actually say the Dexcom on the Loop app, it'll say rising fast or dropping fast, and then I can slow the algorithm down by just putting an override on, changing the target range, which you couldn't do that before. And those are really handy.
I was going to say you had more lows before this.
Yeah.
That's what question I was going to ask, because obviously I'm just thinking about me and my diabetes. Obviously, I've got full sight and I'm able to see those things. But I certainly know if I was sticking in 2 units at a time or whatever I was deciding with the insulin pump is kind of, it's easy when you hear those higher glucose numbers that you start throwing extra insulin in. But to have the thing slowing down the insulin or you doing that, I just wondered whether your hypoglycemia rates have changed since being on seen on the system.
Much less.
Yeah.
Time and range is, I think, anywhere between like 70 and 90.
Yeah.
And what's the time below range change from, do you think, from before and after?
I want to say you were never like a ton, but maybe like 3% below range, maybe 4% in a bad stretch, and now it's like 0.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a massive change from a quality of life perspective, because, you're kind of having to stick glucose tablets or whatever down your neck every 5 minutes to try and prevent these things. Having something help you out is, sounds like it would be very useful.
I wake like in the morning, since I've been on Loop, like my target range is set at 6, and I usually wake up at, in the 6s every morning. And
Yeah.
that's a big change.
Yeah.
Would you get quite a few lows overnight before, or lows and highs?
Lows and highs, probably more highs.
Yeah.
Or
And lows were afternoon woodworking.
yeah,
Yeah.
like hot, like
Hot. Yeah.
hot day. They just drop.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's for me, the thing that really stood out for me when Robin sent your story across is there must be quite a few people out there who are listening to this, whether it's educators or people living with diabetes or people who know they've got diabetes who think that, an automated insulin delivery system or even a pump, maybe that's kind of like, it's too risky. It's, it's not possible to do. But to obviously led by you, Roger, because you're obviously extremely knowledgeable and extremely obviously keen to get access to the best therapies, but also to have an education team around you that's kind of willing to work with you to support you in those things is sort of a winning combination that's, allowed you to, maybe get a lower HbA1c, but also have less low glucose levels and a little bit more information and the opportunities that other people with that have just as are run of the course. Certainly in the UK, the hybrid closed loops are being rolled out quite liberally, but I'm sure there's a lot of people with sight issues who probably at the back of the queue because they're not quite sure how to actually make it happen. And just listen to your story from me. I mean, a couple of things. If I was looking after someone or supporting someone, with saying, number one, it's possible, which is that's where it all starts. It takes some time and some effort and some planning and some ingenuity, which you've obviously shown in spades, which is yes, amazing. And then obviously kind of a willingness of trial and error just to kind of give it a go within safety boundaries. And I think, I'm sure there's people listening to this who think, oh, actually, that's maybe a possibility. It's something that was off the table is very possible because someone's doing it. So I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your story, because that's the thing that I took from it when Robin reached out, and just hearing you speak about it. And for you, it's just like, oh, it's just second nature. Everyone sort of does this stuff, and it's pretty straightforward. We did it in a month. It's easy, but I think that's a level of modesty. I think actually it is a testament to you and your grit and determination. So yeah, it's an amazing story. So
I think one of the biggest thing too is that my diabetic team is open-minded, because I've read a lot of posts on Facebook groups that one doctor said it is basically not good. Looping is not good. So like that's just closed-minded. And then I think there's a lot of endos then.
Yeah. And I think that's why I was so keen to get you on, not only just to hear your story, but also to see some of the things that you've developed, and to see obviously your relationship with Robin and the team, and that sort of that team cohesive approach to getting someone access to a therapy that people just don't think is an option. And I think to see that come loud and clear, it certainly put a smile on my face for going into Christmas and the new year, because it's just the type of possibilities that I think people need to be open to, as you said, and your team was. But also you need someone with a little bit of grit and determination. Sounds like you got a bit of fire in your belly as well. I'm sure you've definitely got a bit of that going on. Robin, is there anything that you would like to sort of leave the listeners, or even the healthcare professionals or people with diabetes with? Because obviously you've observed this from an educator perspective, and you've maybe seen what other teams is and isn't possible. And Roger sounds like he's fairly unique, but I'm sure there's other people out there who could, take this template and think about it.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of going back to the basics, and people worry about safety and what about highs and what about lows. And I think ultimately it's going back to the basics, because most of the blind individuals you and I met at Diabetes Canada are actually still using pens. I think Roger was kind of the exception to the rule, that he was already using a manual pump. So to me, if someone can navigate pen, there's your fail safe, right? So if a pod fails or blood sugars are really high, they already have the skill set. And if they're not having recurrent DKA as is, they're clearly managing okay. I think the biggest thing that I've realized is, you're proficient at navigating the accessibility voiceovers. I'm terrible at it. So he always turns it off for me to navigate his phone. But simple things. So I think one thing that was a change for me is realizing, in healthcare, we often have to we really keep our distance. And for Roger, I actually have to physically place things in his hands and then show him hand over hand where things are, so that he understands, we're holding a pod. What is this blue tab? And what do we do with this? And really describing it. So if someone is around that is sighted, he could say it's a blue tab, right? And also give him the skills to communicate. And, there's 2 holes on the Omnipod. So what's the other one? And really taking the time myself to play with these devices, closing my eyes, what can I feel? And then holding it with him. So I think that's a piece that is really important. And I know we met a few individuals at Diabetes Canada, and they said the biggest barrier was no one would landmark these items with them. And they have a lot of the same skills as you, but no one's taken the time to just this is this hole. And I think that's actually quite pivotal.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I think anything is possible, and anyone can go on AID. It's just our approach, how we do it. It's kind of like what you have actually on your website, John, is, we survive and then we thrive. And that's kind of something we've done here, I think.
Biggest thing the blind person has to have the skills, the technology skills with his phone or their phone, and they have to know how to, you know, do the voiceover
Yeah.
and what, because there's a few little quirks that I found that were, like for instance, if
Changing the basal.
yeah, like if the voice is too fast, it'll crash the program of the app. So I can't have it up too fast. And there's to change some of the setting, like the basal and that, there's just before it, there's like it says to me, it says forward. So you got to tap on that first, and then it'll let you go in and change.
And that can
So-
be a little bit challenging because obviously Roger doesn't live in the city. So sometimes we'll talk on the phone and he'll be like, where does it say forward? Why does it say forward? So
Yeah.
it took us a bit to realize, and like basal rates are like those rotating discs that he would have, and those don't work the best with voiceover. So it's taken a little bit of practice, I think, of how to navigate it.
Yeah,
But
once
yeah.
you get used to it, once you play around, it's you figure it out.
It sounds like a lesson in opportunity, necessity in some ways, skill,
Mhm.
get in the game, trial and error, kind of all of the things there. Like I said, well, I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It certainly brought a big smile to my face, and I hope that people listening may just offer them a little opportunity to think about this. So probably some people who they support, or maybe themselves, if they're listening, thinking that this is out of the question for them, and they'll be able to go and see some of the things that you've developed, think about some of the technologies that are available and the voiceovers and the different apps, and start to begin to maybe even learn a phone first up as a first step. Knowing that it's possible, I think, and also the benefits can be gleaned is such an important thing. So I want to say thank you to you both for coming on. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a fantastic New Year. And I'll hope to see Robin, I think, at ATTD.
Yes, I have our abstract accepted there. So yes,
Okay. Well, happy holidays, and I'll see you there.
thank you so much, John.
Thanks.